Good evening and welcome back. I'm Bill Quinn. We are pleased to have you with us here on the Georgia show. Todd Wood is traveling, and he will be back in the coming days, doing his work with with the groups, and so we will press on this evening. We're going to talk about several things tonight. We have noted in the past two shows some undercurrent of work going on, we believe, against the state election board, and it's just amazing because they seem to be the only organization that's to date has been able to uncover truths regarding the elections here in Georgia. So we'll talk a little bit about that. We are going to hear about some of the other election integrity work that is going on, some of the meetings and events that will be coming up, and we'll hear from leaders from Georgians for Truth and also Jason Frazier, who many will recall has been kept from assuming his appointed role on the Fulton County Board of Elections by the Fulton County Commission. They will continue to fight to keep Jason and Julie Adams from assuming their appointed roles under the new appointments that have been put forth by the GOP in Fulton County. So with that, let's once again, we appreciate you being here. If you haven't yet subscribed to the places we're posting, please do that. We are getting a lot of followers on not just on Rumble, on CDM1 on Rumble, but also on X. And we're on X in Georgia Record. We're on X with CDM.press. And we're also on Truth Social under CDM. And we have many, many followers on Truth Social. So please consider following us there. Also, if you haven't yet signed up for our no ad subscription, that would be a gigantic help for us. We are attempting to make sure that we bring you the very best news, the very finest reporting, and quickest and broadest. In order to do that, it takes resources. And so by subscribing to our no ad subscriptions, you can help us put together some of the resources necessary to do that work. So before we get going with the show, I'd like to have a message from one of our sponsors, and then we'll come back and welcome in our first guest.
I'm David Cross, and you may know me from my election integrity work, but I also own U.S. Asset Management, an investment advisory practice. I've been an advisor for nearly 30 years, and one of the questions I get asked most frequently is, do I have enough money relative to other people my age? And while that's an interesting question, it's also the wrong question. The right question is do you have enough money to sustain your lifestyle for the rest of your life? This is a question you should know the answer to. This is what we do. Check us out at us-am.com and look for our big proud American Eagle logo.
All right. So our first guest this evening is Field Searcy. Field is co-founder of Georgians for Truth. Field, thank you so much for making time this evening, my friend.
Bill, thank you always for inviting us and helping us get our message out. We really appreciate the Georgia Record and the Georgia Show.
Very kind. Thank you. So there's a number of things at play as we sit here this evening. You were very astute and wrote an amazing article that we put out on the Georgia Record, but is also making its way all through the communities of election integrity experts and workers all across Georgia and beyond. And so kudos on that. I'd like to have you talk a little bit about what it was that brought you to go ahead and write this and see that it was published. And so I'll flip it to you, if I may, Field.
Well, I started going to these state election board meetings, I think August of 2023, and really just trying to learn what this board does and how it functions. To be honest, I've been against appointed boards in my past political activities because I didn't feel like they were accountable. But in this particular case, I feel like the state election board in Georgia is the only body that's actually holding our elected representatives accountable. And specifically, we would go almost every month, and we would rally a crowd there. And we would hear these cases, and the SOS would send a representative investigator to explain them. And they would be things like, well, this person took a photograph in the booth or in the polling place, or this person was handing out, water bottles in line for people waiting in line, and things like this, which are maybe technically they are violations of Georgia election law, and we want enforcement of Georgia election law to its fullest, but they don't really impact a lot of votes and really change outcomes of elections. But what we were seeing is over the last 2.5 years, what we've seen is that major cases that involve tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of votes have been suppressed. And specifically, what we call out SCB 2023-025, people known as the Rossi-Moncla case, that finally got a hearing in 24. And after, Dr. Johnson, actually, she really did her own investigation and looked at that case and found out that the Fulton County had all these violations of the law. And it turned out to be over 340 violations of the law that they had committed in 2020. Now, we're in 2026. We've already had 2 more elections since then. We got another election coming up this year. This is not about 2020. This is about all our elections going forward, and it's not a Republican issue. It's not a Democratic issue. So we saw in that case right there, this case was suppressed by certain members on the SCB, and certainly suppressed by the Secretary of State's office. And we started seeing this pattern where they would bring all these minor cases, they spend all this time and start, really taking a lot of time in the SCB on minor stuff, but not really looking at the larger systemic issues that the SCB should be looking at. The case like the Rossi-Moncla case, the case that came up just in December, the Cross-Moncla case about the 148 tabulator tapes that were unsigned that affected 315,000 votes. And what we found out, learned from that is that apparently they took the memory cards out of the tabulators that were at the precincts and then put them in another tabulator and printed out the tapes. So, and of course, there was no poll workers there to sign it. So these kind of things are egregious, and that's what the SCB needs to focus on, not the minor things that could be turned over to a local DA, the local board of elections, and let them adjudicate those at the local level. But that's kind of the essence of my article. And as you said, you've posted on Georgia Record, and we appreciate that. And it's also on georgiansfortruth.org as one of our top articles.
Yep. And so georgiansfortruth.org is available on the internet, and you've got a number of pieces of information up there, not just this, but you guys have worked for what, 4 years now, almost 5?
I've been tangentially involved in election integrity going back to 2015 or 14, but really since March of 23, when I partnered up with Sam Carnline, really we had put our heads down into trying to make a difference and get people rallied, engaged. And we've had, 300 and 400 people, along with other organizations like Voter GA, but we rallied a lot of people, and I think we've made a difference. We've really called out, we thought were bad actors on the board that had conflict of interest. And there was one SCB meeting where there were over 50 people that spoke in public comment that called for the resignation of one board member, and it happened. So we can be effective if we get informed and we get engaged. We can be effective, and that's where we are. We're in the awareness business, and we call out things that we see that need to be handled more transparently and more judiciously. But if you read my article, you'll see that it looks like there was a pattern that even the current chairman was suppressing the SCB 2023-25 case, the Rossi case, and also the SOS looks like they were suppressing the Cross-Monkla case. If you read the article, and we got a report from that was on Facebook, the executive director reported that finally they realized that well the SOS said they're not going to be attending any more of the meetings back in October, November timeframe. They weren't even going to send a representative to answer any questions about their investigations. And so finally, the three of the board members said, let's get a full list of the backlog, and let's triage this and find out what needs to be looked at that's most critical, that affects the most number of voters and most number of votes. And let's look at those cases. And that's how that Cross-Monkla case came to the forefront. And my understanding is there's another 8 or 10 more cases just as egregious as that one, that it looks like they've been suppressed by the Secretary of State's office for years. They would decide what cases are presented forward for the SCB to look at, and they would bring these smaller nickel dime cases and really not bringing forward the ones that are critical, that expose the SOS, that expose other bad actors.
Yeah. You're using very kind language when you call it suppression. Some people have called it periodically cover-ups or worse. And, we go back to situations such as when the State Election Board asked for visibility, the ability to examine the ballot images from Fulton County that had not been produced by the Secretary of State's office. And his own, Brad Raffensperger's general counsel, Charlene McGowan, an attorney herself, responded after some urging from the state election board and said, well, I can only release these to you, and I'm not going to exactly quote her, but it's close. I can only release them to you if you deem that this case is closed and resolved. And it's kind of like saying, well, I have the evidence, but I'm not going to show you till after the court is closed. It's just... Right. It's unbelievable once you understand what's really going on. And
so, yeah, sorry.
That's okay. You also mentioned that there were cases where things had been stalled or slowed down in the process. Lots of times there would be, I recall Joe Rossi and Kevin Muckler both talking about queries that they had posed to the Secretary of State's office and would receive no response, or a very late response and a partial answer, but not a clear answer. And then we, as you correctly said, there were cases where things appeared to be being put off month by month by even the chairman of the SEB, Frazier. And we received reports of this mounting backlog of cases for simple reasons. In some cases, monthly meetings, which are supposed to be held, were in fact not being held. And when they were being held, they weren't able to cover appropriate information because it would be, oh gosh, we couldn't get that ready or something else. So there does seem to be this pattern, as you say, of stalling, of cover up and so forth. Yet just as we begin to see progress made, just as we begin, comes this word that and we see quotes from the head of the Blue Ribbon Committee, Tim Fleming, that allude to them trying to point the finger at the SEB for being the problem. And yet you stand back and you say, wait a minute, isn't the Department of Justice of the United States investigating and now suing Fulton County? Isn't the Department of Justice now suing Brad Raffensperger? How could these things be going on? And yet these people, the Tim Fleming and this Blue Ribbon Committee, seem to be trying to point the finger at the SEB. The SEB is the only thing that seems to be working. So
it really is. There's this narrative, and you can see it in the legacy media, as well as some of the statements by Representative Fleming and others, that they want to put the blame on the SEB for not handling these cases and taking care of this backlog. Well, they've been spoon-fed what they've been looking at up until December. And in December, the meeting, they resolved, it was like 160 or 70 cases that they looked at. And they worked very hard to get those to the forefront. And apparently, according to Mr. Mills, the chairman the day before decided he wasn't going to be in the SCB meeting, and he was against the agenda they were putting forward to handle all these cases. And that was the meeting where the Cross Moncla case came up about the 148 unsigned tabulator tapes. Of course, he didn't show up. Frazier didn't show up for that meeting, but fortunately, Dr. Johnston, the co-chair, stepped in and handled the meeting beautifully, and they went through all of those cases in a couple of days. And so they're really trying to do the hard work that needs to be done. But you see these ties back. Frazier was appointed by Kemp. Tim Fleming's close ties to Kemp, as you pointed out in your article a few days ago. And you see how he wasn't even supposed to be on the chair of the Blue Ribbon Committee. It was supposed to be Victor Anderson. So you see how they're setting up this narrative. They're trying to demonize the SEB so that maybe they can bring it back under the SOS, or maybe they can abolish it or do something else, because the people that are working hard now and exposing the lies and the cover-ups, they're right over the target, and they're exposing what's been going on, and that's what they want to stop. Because our history with Governor Kemp, he's been trying to suppress election integrity for years, going back to the fish fry in 2023. So
the infamous fish fry from hell. It is interesting, but when you've got as many parts of the government that are now focusing on Georgia, it would seem, remarkable to naive to think that simply by pointing a finger at the only organization that's really making progress, that somehow these other organizations, the DOJ and Harmeet Dillon and Tulsi Gabbard, and of course Trump himself, who's spoken repeatedly about Fulton County in Georgia, you can't expect that these folks are going to back off. I would think that they, and very frankly, the nefarious folks, should see right through all that and say, there's no way around this. We're going to have to come clean at some point. And I continue to hold out hope, and I'm hearing from others around the country that appear to be in a position to know that in many cases, maybe in Georgia, maybe in other places, folks are coming forward. And you heard people like Patrick Byrne and others speak of folks that are literally working they're in protective custody now, and they are working to help make sure that the right stuff can be uncovered. I know that sounds like, a movie of the week kind of thing, but in fact, it does appear from those who are in a position to know that these are indeed things that are happening.
Well, you can't have the Secretary of State investigate himself, and bring it back under the wing of the SOS, because, he's the one that decided not to show up to the Curling Raffensperger case. He's the one that decided not to go to the state Senate committee when he was called to come and give a hearing about accounting of what's been going on in the election. So you can't have that person overseeing and in charge of upholding the election law and upholding his own election. That's just problematic from get-go right there.
Yeah, you may recall too that he was called as a witness to the True the Vote trial, the federal trial being held up in Gainesville, and arranged to have his attorneys get him pulled out of that one as well. So he was due to testify, and essentially worked his way out of it so that he did not have to testify in open court. Seems unusual. You would think that if you had important things to share, you would want to share them. And yet Mr. Raffensperger seems to not wish to do that for many reasons. Harmeet Dillon recently, in explaining why she sued Raffensperger in Georgia for the voter rolls, said that they'd given Raffensperger and his office several opportunities to cooperate, to collaborate, work to ensure that we had the voter rolls clean and so forth. And yet they steadfastly refused to cooperate. And it begs the question, why? I mean, if you have nothing to hide, why would you hide? Right.
Yeah.
So
we want transparency and we want integrity, and that's what we're looking for every voter of Georgia, and that's what we're looking for.
That sounds great. So tell me the next things that will be happening. We still have other actions to be had here in January, yes?
Well, we've been working on an audit, a citizen audit of the slog files for 7 counties in the state, from small counties to large. We have a report we're going to be releasing on the 20th. We're going to do a press conference at the Capitol on the 20th, release this report, and specifically looking at the errors in the error logs of the slog file. And the slog file is the system log file that records all the transactions on the tabulator.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the public will be astonished at how many errors are being generated and how much it violates federal guidelines for election systems way outside the bounds. So we're going to be doing that on the 20th at 2 o'clock, South Wing Steps. We ask our supporters and anyone interested to be there. And we hope to have a deeper briefing with some of the legislature later that day to go into more specifics on it. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, the state election board is having their next meeting on the 21st in Winder, Georgia. It's different than normally in Atlanta. It's going to be at the Bartow County Courthouse, and that will be starting at 9 o'clock. And we plan to be there for that. And we hope that all the election integrity supporters will be there to support those on the board that are trying to do what is right. They're trying to do what is just, and they're trying to uphold the law. That's what we're hoping for this month.
That's great. Well, you and Sam and the rest of the team with Georgians for Truth have done just an amazing job now for, as you said, these years, and it's much appreciated. You've inspired so many across Georgia to become involved, and that's one of the reasons that you're able to see the kind of turnout that you guys get when you do an event. So thank you for all of that, and we will be expectantly looking to see what the results are as we get into more of these reviews and the next meetings in January and beyond. So,
well, we appreciate all our supporters, and we certainly appreciate you and Todd and what you guys are doing to help us too. So
you bet. Very kind, Field. Thank you for being with us, and we will look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, we'll take one more break, and then we'll come back with our next guest.
Well, in the case of hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin, these are 2 medications that have been FDA approved for use in humans for decades. They are very, very inexpensive. Interestingly, available over the counter in almost every other country other than the US and Canada. Yeah. You can just walk into a pharmacy and buy them like we buy Tylenol in much of the world because they're that safe. And we've known for decades that ivermectin has very strong antiviral properties. It has anti-inflammatory properties, and both ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine are what we call zinc ionophores. They help to move zinc from the bloodstream into the cell, which is where it needs to be in order to fight off a virus. So lots of application for these, and we have every reason to believe that those drugs also will likely have some efficacy against H5N1 or a number of other respiratory viruses that we may meet down the road.
All right. Well, let's welcome in our next guest, Jason Frazier. Jason, thank you so much for making time.
Yes, good evening.
You always have the great background. You look like you should be on Fox News or something. It's a wonderful background.
Well, I kind of like sitting here with you. How's that?
Well, that's great. So, you may have heard what we were discussing with Field Searcy just a few minutes ago. There's this what seems to be an undercurrent of feedback that says, hey, there's this group that wants to point the finger at the SEB rather than face the facts that there's problems in the actions of the Secretary of State's office, probably perhaps the operations of our elections in Georgia, perhaps the fact that we're even using machines at all is a key fact that we need to come to grips with. And yet that isn't the substance of the discussion. It's, but we need to roll these people in. And I think one of the articles that we cited from the Guardian, I think Kemp or someone on his team seemed to say, well, we need to rein in the SEB, rein in. I think of all the work that you've done, all the work that Georgians for Truth have done, and all that's gone into these last 4 years or 5 years. And, without the good people on the SEB trying to uncover this stuff and finally getting to the point where we can kind of crack it open a little bit, we still would be just struggling up a hill, trying to push a boulder up the hill. What do you think?
I think you nailed it. I mean, the SEB was, I'd say, just not functioning before we got 3 good votes on the board. I mean, Jan is a rock star, Dr. Janice Johnston, but she was alone there for a while, and then she got some help. And without 3 good, strong voices on there, cases weren't being brought up, cases weren't being heard. Mm-hmm. I mean, we know the Moncla Rossi case, that one's been buried. A lot of folks that I work with, their cases, they submitted them 2, 3, 4 years ago, and they just sat. A couple of SEBs ago, I was there, and a couple of cases were brought up simply to dismiss them because the individual had died. I mean, it literally took them that long to bring the case to the hearing that they dismissed it because the person who may or may not have committed the crime had passed away. I mean, that's a sign, and that's happened more than one meeting. So, I mean, my case, I had a case that just got brought up in the last hearing that I turned in 2022, and that'll be heard again here in January at the meeting, and that involves people that were given credit for voting twice in the 2020 election. The most perfect election the world has ever seen in Georgia, according to the Secretary of State's office. Well, I'm sorry, it's only perfect if you lock the door, close it, pretend everything is perfect, but never open that door, never show the ballots, never let anything be investigated. Then sure, it's whatever story you want it to be.
Yeah. Well, you personally have been involved in a number of things, and you've apparently scared some of the folks that you may know too much for them to allow you into certain positions. Many people around the country know that Fulton County has fought tooth and nail to prevent you from being able to take a seat on the Fulton County Election Board. That would have happened almost nearly automatically in years past, except now the county commission led by Pitt and a few of his, and unfortunately they have a majority on the commission, have been able to prevent that from happening. Yet they don't seem to come up with good reasons why they won't just accept it. They've accepted Democrat nominees very easily, and yet they stand in the way even today to you and Julie Ellen retaking her seat.
Julie Adams,
pardon me.
Yeah.
Retaking her seat in the Fulton County Election Board. What is it you think that you have them so scared by? What is it you may uncover that they don't want uncovered, do you think?
Well, I think they're used to people just going on that board and really not doing a whole lot, not asking questions, not digging in, not understanding what a voter roll is, or the fact that you can get a voter roll, you can pour through it, you compare it with voter history files, and find people registered more than once, voting more than once. You're going to see a story break here later on this evening on showing UPS stores where a lot of people are registered. There are virtual mailboxes with over 100 people registered to vote at them in Fulton County. There's empty lots, highway overpasses, things that Bill, and a lot of your audience know, but a lot of the folks outside of Georgia just haven't been exposed to it. I mean, if you live in good, well-run states, you're not going to see that. And if you're a normal person, you're going to think that is ridiculous. That's clearly conspiracy theory. That could not happen. But here in Fulton County, it absolutely does happen. And it's time to break that to the masses. So we're going to see if we can do that.
Yeah. One of the things that isn't commonly known, especially outside Georgia, is that there are so many locations that have been used to register literally thousands of, I'll call them registrations. They may not even be people in some cases, but they use the location as a registration point. So they have an address to use.
Right.
I just saw a report in the last few days that said one of the churches, literally right across from the Capitol, has thousands of
Right.
voters registered there as if they live there, yet obviously they cannot.
Yep.
And it isn't
Go ahead.
just one church, it's multiple churches.
Yeah.
And then you and others have done so much work to show that no matter what county it is, and there's 159 counties in Georgia. Maybe that's one of the reasons that we seem to be so easy to take advantage of. There's lots of places to hide when you got lots of little 159 cubby holes.
Absolutely.
There's all these addresses that make no sense. Sometimes the name of the street is unknown. Sometimes the person's name they might be listed 3 or 4 times with slightly different spellings of their name. Sometimes the name inverted. Sometimes the initials inverted. Every trick you can think of to make up more registrations.
Yeah. I mean, I turned in a new State Board of Elections complaint on New Year's Eve. One of the 5 I turned in on that day. I was very busy over the holidays. And one of them was a list of several hundred folks that between the previous November municipal election and a couple months prior, several hundred folks had their names flip-flopped. So they went from Bob Smith to Smith Bob. And the reason I was notified of that is a friend of a friend went to the precinct, tried to vote. They couldn't find him. They looked up his name. His name wasn't there because it was backwards. They looked up his address. Somehow or another, they changed his address to a place that he had never lived. And so I get a phone call and I look up an old voter roll. I find the guy. So I know his ID number. So I go to the new voter roll and find him, and his name is inverted, and he's at an address he says he has never lived at and has no idea why he was registered there. So he was able to go back and vote provisionally simply because I found his ID and I knew what district he should have been voting in. So they got the right folks on the ballot for him.
Yep. It's very interesting. You should bring up the notion of the voter ID number being a key to this.
Yeah.
I had the chance to speak with Peter Tickton a couple of weeks ago. He is the lead attorney for Tina Peters.
Yes.
And one of the things that he brought up is that is a known problem, characteristic, I guess is a better way to describe it. In many states, they take the names, they can do anything they want with names and initials and addresses, mix them all up, make gobbledygook out of it. But the one thing that they have to have unique in each registration is that voter ID number. And it may not even have a relationship to a real person, yet the number is what's used to place a vote. Yeah. And if you're going to be in this game of creating elections, then that having those voter IDs available is critical, isn't it?
Yes. And I mean, that one that I stumbled onto really makes me wonder, is that why there are so many people double registered with inverted names? Because somehow or another they get flip-flopped. Somebody can't find their registration. They're told they're not registered, so they just register again. And then what happens to that backwards name? I mean, who knows? This particular guy, they moved into a new address. Is that the first step in some shady business, or was it just another one of those clerical errors that Fulton County has accidentally has on a regular basis?
The notion of more registrations than people is become widely known now in Georgia. Members of
Fulton.
Right, members of the election board itself and others have noted that, well, in my county, Forsyth County, I believe we have there's a measurement known as voting, current voting age adults in the county. In other words, those old enough to be registered and actually vote. And so you look at that number, and that should define the upper limit of the possible registrations. Now, obviously, not everybody theoretically registers, so the actual registration should be lower than that.
Yeah.
But what happens when you have a county that has 113 or 110% or sometimes higher of the number of current voter age residents in that county registered? How could that be? You don't have enough residents to make up that number. It's kind of like I've got, 47 people at the party, but there's only 20 in the room. How could that be?
Yeah. But it helps the budget. I mean, I don't know if you noticed, but Fulton County, their 2026 election department budget is $32.5 million, something like that. 32.6, if I remember right, which is a ton of money. And if they're registered at 113%, well, if you took that 13% off the top, and we know, like you said, not everybody wants to be registered. Some people are new to town and they just haven't registered yet. It should be a decent amount below 100% in practicality. I mean, we would like everybody to register to vote, but that's not reality. So just say at a minimum, drop 13% off. You're saving millions of dollars to the election department if they actually cared to do it.
That's right. So as we go forward, now that we see the DOJ beginning to investigate Fulton County and Brad Raffensperger and his, unusual dealings, I guess we'll call it, to be kind at the moment. And we see many people up to Trump and others talking about Georgia and some of the strange anomalies or worse that we faced for these past 5 years. What do you sense? Do you have a comfort level that the right folks in the Trump administration and the various agencies have eyes on Georgia? Do you feel like they have a handle on what's going on here?
I feel like they do. I mean, I'm not talking to anybody in those positions, but it seems like everybody knows somebody that is in my circle and probably yours. That it seems like there are a lot of questions being asked. I'm being asked to give some of the information I know to certain people, and then they pass it up the chain. Mm-hmm. So the fact that people are finally asking, I mean, I've been in this for, 5+ years now, pretty much working nonstop on election issues, and very few people were asking about it. But now it's like every day, hey, can you pull this report together? Can you send me everything you got? I mean, the fact that they are concerned now, they're focused on it. That's step one. But I feel pretty confident. I mean, Harmeet Dillon, she's asking the right question. She's not afraid to poke the bear. And all eyes are on Fulton County, let's be honest. So if anything's going to happen, it's got to happen here.
Yep. Well, I agree. Fulton is key. Fulton is the most populous county in Georgia. Yet when you and I and others started looking at the data, it was pretty clear that there were anomalies in many, many counties. I don't know if it's all. Certainly some of the smaller counties, it would be tougher to hide certain things when you've only got 1,500 people in a county.
Sure. Everybody knows each other.
Right. But there's plenty of counties with 100,000, 200,000, 300,000 or more residents. And, you start adding that up and you've got a lot of places to go. And I believe many folks had looked at up to the first 22 counties, which is over half the populace of Georgia, and found problems in almost every one. Now, they were often different and they didn't look exactly the same. Whoever was manipulating things was doing it in such a way that, things didn't match up, so they wouldn't be a glaring, hey, here I am over here. So yeah. It'll be interesting to see what gets discovered as we go forward.
Well, I think just the fact that Brad Raffensperger, it has to be sued to give the complete voter roll to the DOJ. That says a lot to me. I mean, like I've told you before, if I tell my children to clean their room and they lock the door and put 14 chairs in front of the door and say, oh, everything is clean, there's probably a good chance it's not. So Brad Raffensperger loves to say we have the cleanest voter rolls on this side of the Milky Way, but I doubt we do if he's afraid to share it. And if I can look at the voter rolls, you've looked at the voter rolls. A lot of folks have. There are lots of people registered more than once, lots of people at business addresses. There was a guy named No Name in Fulton County, a guy named Missing in Fulton County. I mean, there are issues. A blind man can stumble on the issues in Fulton County and in a lot of these big metro counties. So if they are able to, if the DOJ is able to get a fully unredacted voter roll where they can compare against Social Security numbers to see, is a person a real person? Is that person living in 14 states and voting in all of them? That's where the real information will come. And that's what I'm looking forward to.
Yeah. In a few minutes, we're going to be talking about the legislative session, which will open up again in this coming week. And one of the things you mentioned, when people ask for information, but the converse of that is also notable. In many cases, researchers early on, 2021, early 22, were offering information to legislators to say, hey, I found something. Look at these, look at this voter roll, look at this list in, XYZ county. And in many cases, they were either unable to get an appointment. The legislator would say, oh, sure, call me next week. We'll set up a time to go through it. And they didn't. Many folks did actually get the chance to talk with their legislator or tours about what they'd found. And yet, was anything done? Was any investigation even started? And the answer was no.
We know 0 bills were passed in elections last year. 0.
That's right. And you think back to that, and you think back to, if you recall, Trump was already foreshadowing that we needed to move away from machines and go to paper ballots and hand counting and so forth. It would have been the simplest thing in the world for the Georgia legislature to take at least preliminary action to move in that direction, and yet they didn't. And the question then becomes, why? If you know that that's a key direction, and you are saying that, all these people that are running for election right now, they all have their blue suits on, their red ties, and they're standing next to, Trump in some photo in his blue suit and red tie, and they've all got their thumbs up, yet none of them did what was necessary to move in the direction that he suggested. Why would that be? How could that be?
We're a Republican state, right? So they want to do what the president says, or at least that's what they claim.
They claim. That's right. So it will be remarkable to see what happens now. I do, and you've probably heard me and others speak of it in past months, we do have a high degree of sensitivity based on some of the things that did pass last year, but just as high a degree of concern about the things that did not even get voiced. And I am hoping that this year the message can be received by our elected officials that folks are onto this now, and they have got big, wide, bright eyes on Georgia, and will not be sitting back, paying no attention to what gets done or doesn't get done.
Yeah, it's amazing how much Fulton County and Georgia elections are in the news cycle right now. I know the issues in Minnesota are really taking first place in all of the news at the moment, but election integrity has been everywhere lately, whereas the first 4 or 5 years I was doing this, I mean, it was you and I and our 3 friends on our Twitter account with 100 viewers that, we were telling our friends about it, but nobody else was really paying attention.
That's right.
They were dealing with their own problems, but now it is really, really tearing it up.
That's right. And when you see Trump posting various things on election integrity, he's reposting things taped during hearings right here in Georgia, going back into 2020. It is unmistakable that this is becoming a vital, and has been a vital issue. It's just coming to the fore now.
Absolutely. And it's,
anything else coming up that you want to make sure people know is an event or something they should be involved in January or beyond even?
Well, I caught the last half of your previous presenter. I mean, I would definitely like to echo folks going to the State Board of Elections is critical right now. I mean, showing support for our 3 good folks up on the board is important. Talking to your legislators on the fact that we absolutely need that board in place and functioning. We do not need the Secretary of State to hide cases, to refuse to bring cases forward, to slow down progress. We need this to function. Otherwise, we can't do anything. I mean, we can yell and scream about Fulton County and these other counties all day long, but if you're going to hide the evidence, what can we do? I mean, granted, we've got our X accounts now that are blowing up with people caring about it, so that the masses are hearing. That puts pressure on the legislators. But we would like things to be investigated so we can say, hey, these officials saw what we saw and we're not all crazy. So that's where I see the most important things to happen right now is go to those state board of elections hearings. And they've got one scheduled every month for the next several months. So they're really going to clear out the backlog if they can continue their momentum.
Yep. I would echo that. I would also say if you have the opportunity to speak with your elected officials in your county or even city to some extent, I would recommend you support and say to them, I need you, Mr. Elected Official or Ms. Elected Official, to support our continued independent state election board. We do not need this to be, once again, reporting to a Raffensperger or something. They appear to be hiding stuff. We don't want things hidden anymore. We want them open. We want them out. And we want an independent board to be able to look at this and say what needs to be done. And we need you to support it, Mr. or Mrs. Elected Official.
Absolutely. We don't need Gabe Sterling to win and him to hide things as the new Secretary of State. I mean, that can't happen, but that man is running for it.
Don't even get me started there. All right. Jason, thank you so much for being with us. And thank you again for all the work you've done for these many years. I am hoping, and I will be the first guy there to applaud you when you take your seat in the Fulton County Election Board. Something tells me that will happen before too long, and I'll be happy to see it actually happen.
I'm hearing noise that it could. It's still stuck in appeals court, and they've got it on the calendar for February, but the pressure is really mounting. And when you look at Fulton County and you say, we've only got one Republican on the board, there's an empty seat for the other Republican, it goes back to, hey, Raffi, what are you hiding? I mean, why won't you put a second Republican on the board? And even if I were there, they don't like to share data. So that's another problem. I mean, I could go all day. You could go all day on the problems, but having an empty chair is bad optics, to say the least.
It sure is. It sure is. Well, one last thing I wanted to share before we break. For folks that don't yet follow you, here is your X account, and would highly recommend that they pay attention. You're like many, you're posting fairly frequently, and it usually has all the receipts in it. So it's a good way for people to come up to speed and understand what's going on day by day, week by week as we go forward.
Absolutely. Thank you, Bill.
You bet. You bet. All right, Jason, thank you again for being here, and we will look forward to seeing you again soon, my friend.
Excellent. Have a good night.
Take care. All right. Great session. Great guests. We're going to take one more break, and then I'm going to come back and we're going to talk about the legislative session, and we're going to remind folks of some things that we've seen in previous legislative actions that should be a warning, perhaps, as to what we need to be watching out for, but also maybe a warning to those who might be moving in the wrong direction with some of these pieces of legislation. So let's take a break first, and we'll come right back.
I'm a naturopathic doctor. We are in the world of medicine very acquainted with many modalities, but probably the one most familiar with everybody would be two things: homeopathy and herbs, maybe some nutrients too, vitamins, minerals, that kind of thing. Now, we do know a lot about the drugs because we have to find out what drug you're taking affects you and what nutrient it depletes you of, because most every drug pharmacy product will deplete something. So we have been trained, and we have a database that we can check into that says this is going to take your B12 away. The pharmaceutical company cannot patent organic substances made by the body. You're not born short of Advil. You're not born short of Ritalin.
Yeah.
You can be born short of insulin, right?
Mhm.
The answers to staying healthy and keeping away from even SARS or any of those things getting into you is staying healthy.
Mhm.
You and I get sick because our terrain gets out of balance. Well, that's the same thing in the soil. You and I are made from this thing called dirt. And when we get out of balance, we have the same thing happen. Weeds start to grow in our body. Right? And that's what we want in our body. We want nutrients that we don't understand how to get well enough yet because our suppliers are lacking knowledge on nutrient density foods. So
So
what
this
does
is
it
what
do?
drove you to develop
Well,
this, was your knowledge of this, right?
right?
Mhm.
You know that.
All right, welcome back. So, in the coming days, we will see the Georgia legislature once again convene and begin to consider changes in laws within Georgia. In some cases, they might rescind something. In some cases, they may change something. In other cases, they may add new laws. But most importantly, all of these should always be in the best interests of the residents of Georgia. That's the goal. That's the oath, very frankly, that they take to uphold the U.S. Constitution and the Constitution of the state of Georgia and make sure that our rights are protected at every stage. So, one of the things that we've seen in past years, and we have done our very best to report it, is when we see something that appears to not be working in the best interests of Georgians, we are hopefully first, as much as we can be, to call it out. And the reason we want to go through this tonight is I want folks to remember what's been done already that we need to question and use that as a platform to consider what they need to be looking at going forward. So you'll recall that we raised the warning flag last year or last session when Governor Kemp, after returning from the WEF meeting, the World Economic Foundation, led by Klaus Schwab and his cohorts, came back and almost immediately called a meeting in order to announce that he was making tort reform one of his key agenda items. Tort reform, essentially changing the rules by which folks could enact cases to recover damages from something that had been done to them or something that had not been done but should have been done for them. And one of the things that we noticed was, why would this be such a big agenda? And as soon as we looked into it, we started seeing some strange anomalies. You'll notice that when people want to do something, they always try to give it a nice name. In this case, there was a pact formed, and the pact was the group pushing for tort reform here in Georgia, and I think probably in other states as well at the same time. And the name of the pact was Protecting American Consumers Together. Gosh, doesn't that sound nice? Well, it seems nice until you look at the people that were involved in this pact and who were pushing it. One was, a long-standing, I think a 30-year veteran of the insurance defense industry, an attorney who defends insurance companies against what? Against findings and rulings and then claims that have to be paid out to people that have been harmed. Another was a former House Speaker from Florida who had, in Florida recently did pass what? Tort reform. The other two folks that were notable within this pact were a well-known expert at medical testimony, usually called by, guess who? Insurance companies to try to protect them. And then the really odd one was a marketing slash, executive director who's listed as a dive master down in Florida. So a really interesting cadre of folks that were supporting this. And in fact, it got passed. So today, if you are harmed in some way, you have other requirements. Your case will have other requirements in order to meet, in order to potentially even file it, or once it's filed, things that you can do to ensure that the evidence gets in front of either the judge or jury or both to protect and watch out for your rights and see that you are taken care of appropriately based on the case. Why was this such a key thing? Well, let's look at another one. Georgia was one of only two states in the entire country to pass what we've referred to again and again and again as the pesticide bill. This was actually a bill that was proposed in very similar form in a number of states, seven, 8, 9, as I recall correctly. But if you looked underneath the hood, what this was a bill to protect pesticide companies from additional litigation. And the timing alone would tell you what was really underneath this. So this got passed. It got passed in very quickly. As a matter of fact, it was pulled through committee so fast that the public didn't even have a chance to be heard on this. Normally, they'll have hearings in committee so that the public can show up and speak to their concerns. This was pulled forward so quickly, it never got the chance to have public comment made on it. And the next thing you know, boom, it's passed. One of the things we learned later was an entire lobbyist firm had been put together or combined in order to push this thing. One or both had been supporting certain types of chemical companies prior to this, and they appeared to join forces and then combine their talents to lobby for this bill. What was behind that, who pushed it, who was funding it all, we will probably learn in the fullness of time. Who benefits from this bill? Well, primarily two companies. One is Bayer, the chemical company that makes a number of pesticides and other types of agricultural chemicals. But Bayer, if you may recall, absorbed Monsanto, and Monsanto was the original manufacturer of Roundup, and so Roundup is now part of Bayer. And two, ChemChina. Bayer is a German company. ChemChina is a Chinese company. Why would our legislators who had to vote for this, why would they be so interested in watching out for the rights and privileges of international, foreign, in other words, chemical companies? Well, again, many of these things come down, we believe, to money. Who is funding this? Who is pushing it from behind? And who is supporting it and leading it in our own legislature? It did pass, and days after it passed, there was a $2.1 billion verdict in, guess what? A case against Bayer right here in Georgia, and in fact, in Cobb County. One John Barnes was a victim and acquired non-Hodgkin's lymphoma from what he and his team said was the use over a long period of time of Roundup chemical. And in fact, he was awarded $2.1 billion just days after this bill passes. And this bill's function is to effectively limit who can file a case against one of these pesticide companies. Here's who sponsored it. Well, a number of senators that put forth this SB 144 bill. Some names that we would prefer not to see on here, some names that many have up to this point sort of trusted and thought, well, gosh, they're trying to work on our behalf. But now you have to ask yourself, is that actually true? I asked several of the legislators after this passed, why in the heck did you vote for this? Oh, well, the farmers wanted it. Well, in fact, when you look underneath the cover, you find out the farmers are the most at risk based on this kind of legislation. They are the most exposed to these chemicals and potentially the most likely to acquire these health deficits. So would that in fact be the case? Or again, are we talking about big ag acting and saying that they are part of the farming group, and yet it's really just about money? Who benefits? There are currently, I am told, 60,000 cases against Bayer as a result of the use of Roundup in various settings across the country. 60,000. You take that and you take the number of people involved in trying to make sure this bill passed, and you begin to get a sense of, okay, who are they watching out for? It's not the next 60,000 people that may be harmed. It's the chemical companies that will be literally sued out of existence if they don't find a way to stop these cases. So this is why you need to ask questions of your elected officials and make sure that they know that you are watching. Here's another reminder. A couple of years ago, I think 2 sessions ago, there was a bill put forward that would have, if someone put up a meme that that somebody didn't like, that the legislators didn't find that they liked, you could be fined, you could be imprisoned for putting up a meme, especially an AI meme, that they found objectionable or that they deemed wasn't true. Well, who gets to decide what's true? And if you're making a joke, is that criminal? If you're pointing out something someone doesn't want to be known, yet it is true, is that criminal? And yet these people, Todd Jones and Brad Thomas, were sponsors of this bill. And I and others spoke in front of the legislature to point out that, it doesn't matter whether it's AI generated or anything else. In this country, we have the right of free speech. And if we don't have the right of free speech, then we are violating our own Constitution. And yet this was brought up 2 sessions ago. It was brought up again last session. And in fact, Mr. Jones, when he spoke to it, got rather adamant on the dais, talking about why it was so necessary. But in fact, haven't we seen that one of the games that's gotten played over these last years is control of free speech to prevent folks from being able to talk about what they see, feel, and observe? And who would want to shut that down? The other thing that has come out is the fact that some elected officials have, we'll call them varied interests, sometimes conflicting interests with their official duties and their private investments or other interests. We've seen things with regard to First Liberty Financial, and the number of the folks the elected officials who may in some cases have received funding, campaign contributions from First Liberty and their affiliated companies and people. There's also this notion of, well, what about when folks own a company and it doesn't seem to be doing some of the things that we would hope that it would do? And one of those examples is a company called Talatrix, which has come up again and again and again in the last 3 or 4 years. Again, chairman, we are told, is Todd Jones, and one of the investors is Greg Dolezal, currently running for lieutenant governor. That company had some serious questions surfaced around it when it was found that apparently Sheriff Labatt down in Fulton County had signed up to have Talatrix technology, might not have gone through the proper steps with Fulton County Commission. And when they began to question it, they elected to actually rescind and cancel their contract with Talatrix and ultimately placed it with another company, apparently. That raises a lot of questions. What was it about Sheriff Labatt? Was there funding that was given to Sheriff Labatt by an organization, a PAC, that had been formed by Talatrix? And what does that reflect about the people that are owners and investors in Talatrix? How is it that funding could be going from a PAC that had been created to Democratic candidates and Democratic candidates for sheriff in apparently multiple counties. You can go back, you'll see our reporting on that at the time. You'll be able to see the comments made during the Fulton County Commission, and they talked about some of the funding that they had discovered that had gone to candidates, both such as Labatt and so forth, but also I believe down into Douglas County and perhaps beyond. And then again, Fulton ultimately chose to use a different monitoring device because of, I believe, the controversy that was surfaced there. Here's a particularly egregious one that we talked about last year. There's a PAC. We didn't check this week to see if it still exists. They may have changed its name or folded it into something else. We don't know yet. But Peach State Values. Peach State Values. Remember that name. And we researched it, and we found that it was a PAC that listed Matt Brass as its CEO in its corporate documents. And we began researching it because it was learned that that PAC had been funding attacks, believe it or not, against grassroots Republican candidates. Now, keep in mind, Matt Brass is a Republican. And why would he be funding attacks on other grassroots Republican candidates? Well, we noted that they had been provided $450,000 in funding by another organization, and we'll show you who that is. This is a little small. You'll be able to, if you go back to the article that I just listed on that last page, you'll be able to look at what this reports, but it essentially lists expenditures that were made to oppose or to support various candidates. And in fact, it admits that they were spending thousands to essentially stop candidacy, stop the campaigns by grassroots candidates in some key areas. Who was doing it? Well, unfortunately, what we found is that $450,000 in funding to Peach State Values came from the Georgia Republican Senatorial Committee, Inc. Who is that? Well, at the time, and it's probably changed leadership now, but at that time, it was Senator John Kennedy, Senator Steve Gooch, and Senator Larry Walker III. How is it that these leaders, one was the Senate Pro Tem, the majority leader, and then the majority caucus secretary, why would they be transferring nearly $500,000 in funding to Peach State Values in order to stop the campaigns of grassroots folks? And indeed, here's a couple examples of the folks that they lodged deliverables, mailers, and other things, trying to portray them in ways that people would not want to vote for them. They called Beth Majerone, who tried to testify in front of Chatham County's election board, and who was physically removed because apparently the election board didn't want to hear what she had to say. They tried to portray her as some sort of a criminal for doing that. That's Peach State Values. And at the time, it was Matt Brass spending thousands to undermine the campaigns of these Republican grassroots candidates. Why would they do that? Well, it was apparently to protect the jobs of the good old boy incumbents that held the roles in these areas. Ben Watson, Rick Williams, and you note in the Peach State Values documents that part of what they did was to support John Still. Is that the right thing to be doing? In one case, we just talked about money going from a company and then its PAC that had been formed to Democratic candidates from what should be Republican folks. How could that be? And yet here we have Republicans spending money to stop other grassroots Republicans. These are the kinds of things that we need to be aware of. These are the kinds of things that we need to make sure does not go on. And the only way to do that is to put a big, bright spotlight straight on it. So as we have in past years, we will continue this year to try to make sure we know of the key bills that are going on, perhaps all of them if we can get to them all, and call out those that we think are absolutely inappropriate, to call on the legislature to pass those that we believe are correct, constitutional, and appropriate, and in the best interest of Georgians. But in any case, we will do our best to make sure that our legislators know that we are watching. And indeed, to those legislators tonight, you can be sure we are going to have eyes on what's going on in the legislature as we go forward. So with that, thank you again for being with us this evening. We appreciate you. And we will be back on Sunday afternoon at 2:00 with more from the Georgia Show, the Georgia Record, and all the team at CDM. Thanks for being here.